Hello, my dear friend. Hello.
Oliver, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you very well.
I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah, it's good.
Can
Welcome.
you hear me?
I just started talking too much, but I'm happy that you could tell me what do you think about the today's status of cinema?
Okay. I think I was interested in what you were saying, and you were in the middle of it. So I'm sorry to interrupt. I really was fascinated by it, and I think this whole conference is devoted to the future. And frankly, I was thinking about it. I don't know the future, and no one does. I've traveled to the future the same way I traveled to the past, with trust, a blind trust, a blind trust, a blind trust in the story of mankind through the ages. Now, that's, in other words, it is, every time you discover the story changes through the years, attitudes of expression, faces on the screen change, styles change, atmospheres change, but essentially, you never really tire of hearing the same story over and over again. We've proven that in the movies by having numerous westerns, somewhat the same themes, and comedies, horror films, mystery, detective stories. They go, how many of them? You see one movie when you're 6 years old, you see another movie when you're 26. You know, it's all kind of a dream. It's part of a whole story of man. And what you come back to each time is the cliche kind of, and I don't call it a cliche with disrespect, I call it I don't want to be jaded. I believe in the cliche being rediscovered. So you have, Western, for example, you talk about Western liberalism, and I was laughing because I was thinking about all the Westerns in which they kill the Indians, That's the European idea of Western liberalism. It's fine, but and it's beautiful. The movies were beautiful. Now they're changing, and I accept that change. In fact, I still go to the movies and I watch a lot of home television. It's my job, and I enjoy both. I enjoy television. There's some big hitters out there, and I enjoy the features. A lot of new features. Every year I see maybe 20, 30 films, as well as 100 old films. I love old films. So I go from old to new. And I don't sweat it. I'm not worried about the future. The future will take care of itself. What I hate are the jaded people. That's to say, people who think they have seen it all and they're bored. A film critic, people don't think about this, but a film critic that you read and you're supposed to believe, he processes about 500 films a year, and a TV series maybe 200 times a year. But the audience, the majority of the audience, maybe 1 to 5 times a year. The audience is way behind the critic. And what's old to the critic is really sometimes quite new to the human being. And later when we talk, I'll point to some specifics. So have mercy. Mercy is really an important thing. Be generous with criticism. When I was younger, I was a film student. I was also kind of a critic. I was too hard on the filmmakers. I said, you have to make an 8.5. You have to make the classic films over and over again. But it's impossible, as you know, Emir. You've been around a long time, and I loved some of your films so much. But we can't. You have to give mercy to the filmmakers, which I don't see enough of, and I think that is a problem in the West. There's a lot of, I'm sure maybe in Russia too, there's a lot of picking apart and criticism. And that's because it's a jaded culture. But I always think that was true of all critics through time. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
My dear friend, don't you think cinema will share the destiny of an opera in the cinemas? If you put together all the ways you could make a projection of the movie, classical movie or the movie that is going on the screen, don't you think that it's going to share the destiny of the way that we see operas in big cities? That each big city has one place where we'll show the movies and the rest of it will be shown through many different ways that we already use.
Well, we have home screen, so people who can afford a bigger and bigger screen, it looks great at home. With digital cinema now, the quality of each print is more guaranteed than it used to be in the days when we had to run to each theater to see what the film looked like in the theatrical version, and we would be horrified by the differences in the theater. With digital, I feel much more comfortable, and the films at home that on a big screen look fabulous. So I think you're wrong. I think the opera, the idea is very 19th century. I think there'll be a new mobility in cinema. There'll be all kinds of mobile cinemas that can move from small towns to cities and do special things to show there'll be incredible new versions of pictures. There'll be images that we could never dream of. I've seen so many recent movies. I mean, for example, it's a big flop in the West, they say, but watch Megalopolis by Francis Coppola. The imagery, forget about the story if you don't understand it or understand it. The imagery is stunning. It unfolds like a dream, but it's such a beautifully made movie that you couldn't do before because we didn't have the technical qualities that we now have. So, and what we can do with not only CGI, but what we can do with artificial intelligence is unbelievable. It's a new field. It's going to make movies better than ever. That's what I feel.
So, do you believe that the TV series are going to be much more home for serious topics and the serious socially relevant questions than what cinema used to absorb?
No, I don't. You're talking about, distribution of television can deal with serious subjects. So can the movies. They can exist side by side. They're not in competition. People who don't want to go to a theater will not go to a theater, but they will have great access to the movies faster. And the movies that are made specifically as streamers will be made as big as they can make them. They can make Cleopatra that way. And you can screen it on a big screen somewhere. You'll find a big screen if you want to go to a big screen. You can't force people to do what they don't want to do, and most people stay home or they're a little lazy. I love to go to the theater because you get your blood mixed up with other people, you hear their reactions, and it's nice, it's good. But it's not the be-all, end-all. I could exist with culture, reading a book, listening to music, watching movies at home.
But making our projects, I believe so, it's your case too, you, at least myself. I was always making movies, and there was a first screening in which the length was going over 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours, and then there was a very hard time to bring it back to the length that is good for cinema. When we want to do the piece of classical literature, and if you want to squeeze it into 2 hours or 3 hours, it's a very difficult job. That's why I believe that the extension of what I hated when I was a young film director, which is television itself, that kind of interpretation of the good literature or literature on the screen, it's much better home for this to go to TV series because of the lengthy way of expressing yourself.
I don't agree. I don't know, I'm sorry, I mean, I love you, but it's, that's to me old-fashioned. Great literature, I mean, come on. David Lean made Great Expectations all over, Great Expectations especially, in two hours and a few minutes. And it's a brilliant interpretation of a long book. If you make that for television, it would make it into 8 hours, and it would go on, and it would be a serial made to make you come back week by week. Take your pick. If you want to get Great Expectations in that form, you can see it in some with television actors or people who do those kind of things for television. That's fine. Or you can do it. Watch the classic movie, and you'll get this incredible education in English culture. I saw the other day, I saw just at the Nosferatu, which has been done dozens of times, the story of Dracula. It was done by Murnau in 1920, I don't know exactly the year. Nosferatu. So it was done by a young filmmaker called Robert Eggers, American filmmaker, very talented, who did several years ago. He did a film that scared the shit out of me. It was called The Witch. I don't know if you saw that in Russia, but it was very scary. One of the scariest films I've ever seen. I don't like to be scared, but I was quite haunted for months by that film. And this movie is not scary, but it's beautifully done. It's you know, how many times can you redo Dracula? But this guy went back to the original novel by Bram Stoker, which from the 1890s, and he reinterpreted it his way. He didn't do it the way Bela Lugosi did it with James Whale. He found his own interpretation, and it's quite different. I won't tell you the differences, but they stand out, and that, you should see the film because you will understand another way of interpreting that story.
One question: you witness cinema. My dear friend, another question. You remember in 40s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, we used to have the waves of different cinemas, Italian, French, American, German, Japanese, and they were all like waves coming from the open sea and overflowing all the world with at least 5 to 10 great movies. Why we don't have it today all over the world?
Oh, bullshit, Amir, come on. I travel, as I said, I travel to the future as I did to the past. It's all one thing, you know. There are waves of on streamers you can see a whole list of Korean movies you would never have access to. Chinese movies, Japanese movies, you have Indonesian movies, you have French, German, Italian, and there's some great movies in there. You just have to find them. But there's much more is being offered. A menu of 1,000 films. Every night you don't have, I mean, you have so much choice, and sometimes it's too much choice. You don't want to even face it. Some people, I notice a lot of people who watch television, they just prefer to watch something that they can watch without having to think about what they want to see. In other words, they watch the news or a sports event, which is relaxing. They're tired, they don't want to go through. Why do I have to pick up among 25 films and blah, blah, blah? So it's so much nicer now, it's so much better. But you know, there are Italian movies that are just as good as, I believe, as what Fellini and De Sica did. They're younger filmmakers, they just need more time to make films that are as good, because there's some of them are like, well, some of them are 50 years old, but I don't know, did you see, at Cannes, did you see Parthenopia, the new film by Sorrentino? By any chance? Parthenopia. Emir.
You know, maybe I didn't ask you properly, but what I was asking is the following. How come, I'm not saying that we don't have a good movies streaming all over the place, being hidden in the festivals, open in the festivals. I'm saying that how come that when you were making your movies and you were part of the so-called American way in which we have seen Bob Rafelson, we have seen a line of beautiful movies in 70s and 80s. The same way happens to Germany. I'm asking, how come that we don't have kind of strong waves of feelings of the certain territories? How come and what happened, this is the main question, that we now have this kind of field of films coming from everywhere? Is it just because the new technology or something else?
No, because the films are good. Their stories are still good. Many of them stand out. I've watched enough to tell you, I can guarantee you, there's a menu of films out there. I can name some of them right now. I told you Megalopolis. I told you Parthenopia, made by the Sorrentino. 10 years ago, he made a film called Youth, which you should also see. It's a spectacular film, visually, mentally challenging. It's a new Italy. You have to accept change. I told you about Nosferatu, about this horror film that's been made dozens of times, very well by some people, badly by others. And look how it's been remade with a new interpretation from the original novel by a young American filmmaker, not so young. Anyway, this is, I can point to, did you see the film by you're near Greece, you saw the Greek filmmaker, Poor Things, you saw with Emma Stone, I presume, at last Oscar? Poor Things?
Yes, I did.
Are you hearing me?
I did, I hear you. And
do you see?
Yeah,
I see Poor Things, I'm asking.
Yeah, but...
Okay, if you did, you have to recognize it as a new style. It's visually stunning, and it hasn't something you have not seen before. At least I think so.
And you want to say...
Or else, I mean, I can't... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, in fact, you are saying that the movies made today, they are equally good to what it used to be in 70s, 80s, and 90s. But I was going to say another thing.
I am.
Do they make impact on the audience the way you were making and all the American good cinema? I'm not speaking about successful cinema. I'm speaking about periods when cinema was absorbing socially relevant themes and being as important almost as a human life. Are they having...
Oh, I think you're being a little bit... I think the filmmakers are not stupid. They address themes. The American system works in a strange way because it has more people. It's more of a collaboration. So sometimes the director doesn't even know about the screenplay. The screenplay is coming to him from a source, like the studio or producer. So there's a collaboration of different people who work on a movie, but it's still a movie about the time. That's fascinating sometimes not so good. But I think you're being too harsh in judgment. For example, I was thinking about this movie, for example, The Apprentice. That was a new movie that was made on Donald Trump. It's fascinating, realistic, harsh. It's about New York City in the 1970s. I was quite stunned by it. I saw it twice now. It had that Sidney Lumet 1970s harsh grittiness about New York City. It reminded me of 12 Angry Men. It reminded me of, French Connection. It had that feeling of a city that was hard on people, and how this man, it's a dramatization, how he grows in his strength and in his power through the power of another man who gives him, who guides him, who's very corrupt, this man. So it's a fascinating transference of power. That's what I saw in the movie. I'd seen that before, but it's great to see it again when it's well done.
Okay, I will give up on my insisting that there are different ways of how the good cinema is approached today and 20 years ago. And let's speak about the language of cinema. Is the language of cinema anyhow unified? Do we have do we recognize? How do we recognize a good film formally today? How can we say some films are just up from the other on the certain form that we used to do in, as I said, 60s, 70s, and 80s? You had Godard, but you had also, on the other hand, Oливер Стоун. You had Godard, and you have Wim Wenders. There are many authors who were kind of parameters of how the cinema has to look like, or those in between were measured by how much you are like Fellini and how much you are like Rossellini.
I don't agree, Emir. I don't agree at all with what you're saying. I find that you're speaking of a film snobism that I hated as a film student. Snobism. It's the worst. It's that jaded critic, the enemy of excitement and new things and truth. So I don't know why you adhere to this old-fashioned way of European thinking, the Fellini, Godard. You know, it's a different world, and it changes all the time. You have to accept that change is going on. Enjoy the past, but travel into the future with integrity and honesty, and above all, blindness. You need to be blind, as I said, and you need to trust. You need to trust in the repetition of the story of mankind through the ages. We'll always have Bible stories. We'll have all kinds of stories.
Okay, so thank you very much, my dear friend. I hope we see each other, and we sometimes in the future we might continue our discussion about something that is different from...
The last time I saw you, you were leading a rock band in Belgrade.
Not in Belgrade, in Thessaloniki. In Thessaloniki.
I remember you were very nice. Well, we'll see each other. I guess this is it. And thank you very much for having me.
All the best, man.
And,
thank you.
Oliver, thank you very much. All the applause to you. Nice to see you, and thank you for your creation.
Thank you. See you, man.